why. Bulldogs. Where's UMD sitting? Oh my gosh. Oh, they get crazy in Minnesota. This is actually a picture of campus. Right here. As Sarah said, it's a true story. I was almost cast as Robin in Batman Forever. I made it to the final cut of the auditions. They kept having callbacks, and so the audition went really well. And so after I auditioned for Robin, they said, "Would you want to audition for another movie we're casting?" And I said, "Sure." So they said, "Okay." They act out the scene, they filmed it, and they were like, "That was so much fun. We're going to submit you. We think you'd be good as that character." The movie was called Hackers, and I auditioned for the male lead. I didn't get it. But it's interesting because the male lead played opposite the female lead, and the female lead was played by Angelina Jolie, and those two people ended up marrying each other. So I could have been the first ex-Mr. Angelina Jolie. Like, that could have been part of my story, you know? So as we start, we've been going through this whole week talking about living the Catholic life, or living the Christian life, living a life of a disciple. But one of the things I don't know if we've really spent enough time doing is establishing, like, what's the thing we can really trust about the Christian life living as a Catholic? Because I know all of us, right, we're going to go back to campuses. And on campuses, there are going to be a lot of different people believing a lot of different things. And it's really easy in that kind of situation to think like, during that week of SEEK, it was great. Hey, SEEK and week, it all rhymes. During that week of SEEK, it was so good because I was surrounded by people who we all believe the same thing. We're united in our faith, but now I'm back on campus, and who knows? I don't even know what to believe anymore. Because if you're anything like me, in college, I took a number of classes that were called, comparative religion classes. Have you ever heard of any comparative religion classes? Anyone ever taken any of those? Yeah, they're great. They're wonderful, and because it's a good thing, right? It's good to study the different religions of the world. It's good to study what the different people around the world believe. But it's interesting because in every comparative religion class you're ever going to take, it was always the same for me at least. You get the textbook, and each chapter would be a different religion. And so you study Buddhism and Confucianism, and you study Christianity and Islam and Judaism and Zoroastrianism and whatever all the other isms. You study all these things to learn about them, and that's wonderful. But at the end of the day, we have to realize that to look at every world religion in the exact same way is not being entirely honest. Because I want to say this, and it might sound a little bit biased, but I don't mean it in a biased way. We can't evaluate Christianity in the same way that we evaluate every other world religion. And again, that sounds like, well, of course you're going to say that, you're the priest. But it's true because why? Because every other world religion that's ever been established has been established by someone who said one of two things. They either said, I have insight into who God is, or they said, I have a revelation from God. Every world religion either has, I have an insight into God, or I have a revelation from God. Christianity is entirely different. Because the founder of Christianity didn't come on the scene and say, I have revelation from God, or I have insight into God. The founder of Christianity, Jesus, what did he say? He said, I am God. Exactly. He said, I am God. And so if we want to figure out, is Christianity true? We don't have to study every other world religion first. All we have to do is answer one question. Was he telling the truth? All we have to answer is one question. When Jesus said, I am God, was he telling the truth? Because what a lot of people say, how many times have you heard someone say this? Well, I don't believe Jesus is God, but I believe that he's a holy person. You ever hear anyone say that? Right? I don't believe Jesus is God, but I believe he is a prophet. C.S. Lewis, my good buddy C.S. Lewis, man, that guy. He said, that's the one thing we can't say about Jesus. The one thing we can't say about Jesus is that I don't believe he was God, but he was a holy person. Why? Because he claimed to be God. And if he wasn't God, he was either lying, because he wasn't God and he knew he wasn't God, or he was crazy, because he wasn't God and he didn't know he wasn't God. Those are the only two options, or three options really. Either Jesus was lying, he was a lunatic, or he was the Lord. So let's look at this. Actually, C.S. Lewis does this in his book, Mere Christianity. If you ever want to read a book on your way home on the bus, you can get through the whole thing roughly 3 times. So in it, he says, well, let's look at the story of Jesus. Look at the Gospels and see, does this look like a liar? Well, C.S. Lewis examines this and he says, those people who are like not just lying occasionally, but like professional liars, pathological liars, they all have the same kind of psychological profile. And that profile is they're narcissistic, they're uncreative, they lack compassion, they're self-involved. But when you look at the Gospels, what you see is a picture of someone who is the exact opposite. He is absolutely creative. He is the definition of compassion. He is completely not self-concerned, he is other-concerned. In fact, remember that time when Jesus is just exhausted, and he's going across the Sea of Galilee to get away from the crowds, and they're sitting on the crowd, he goes to the shore, and there are all these people, and he says, my heart is moved with pity for them because they're like sheep without a shepherd. That's not someone who's self-involved, that's someone who wants to pour himself out. He doesn't fit the profile of a liar. No, he might be a con artist, but he doesn't fit the profile of a liar. We'll come back to that in a second. So he doesn't look like a liar. Maybe he's a lunatic. How about this? What's the definition of sanity? I would say this. I would say that a person is sane to the degree that their perception conforms to reality. Would you say that's kind of like, that's what sanity is? You're sane to the degree that your perception conforms to reality. So as an example, if I were to say, I'm a priest, I'd be relatively sane because my perception conforms to reality. If I were to say, I am the best priest in the world, you'd say, okay, a little bit less conform to reality. If I were to say, hola, me llamo Pope Francis. And I really thought I was Pope Francis. I'm like, don't tell anyone, okay? And if I was just, I wanted to bless you, okay, here we go. And if I really thought I was Pope Francis, after a couple minute conversation, you'd be like, okay, backing away slowly from the weird man. If I were to come on the scene and say, hello, my name is Marie Antoinette, have some cake. And I really believed that I was a dead French noblewoman. Pretty quickly, you'd be able to connect the dots and say, you're not connecting the dots. If I were to come on and say, hello, everyone, I'm a butterfly. No, I really am. Like, if I really, you pretty soon catch on that I don't have all my marbles and I'm not connected to reality. Jesus didn't say, I'm a prophet. No, I'm Jeremiah, come back from the dead. He didn't say, I'm even a jelly donut. Jesus came on the scene and he said, hey, you see that big yellow thing in the sky? I did that. He claimed to be God. He claimed to be the uncreated and unstoppable, immortal and all-powerful God. And so after about maybe 30 seconds of conversation, you'd be able to pick up on the fact whether he's connected to reality or not. But everyone who meets Jesus in the Gospels, at least, they're blown away by how absolutely connected he is to reality. So he doesn't seem like a liar, and he absolutely doesn't seem like a lunatic. That only leaves us with one real option, that Jesus is the Lord. At the same time, I realize that's not like, you can like poke holes in that all you want. In fact, sometimes we think the only reason people back in the day, that when Jesus was alive, the only reason they believed in him is because they were so stupid back then, people. They didn't know how to program TiVo, they didn't know how to work iPads. Like, they were so dumb. Jesus says, hello, I'm God. They're like, okay, Jesus, kind of like picking the nose. But that's not what happened, right? When Jesus came on the scene and he said something like, because if someone walked onto the stage with me and said, greetings, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Would you be like, cool? What would you say? Prove it. Exactly. You'd be like, okay, buddy, let's see some stuff. And that's exactly what happens in the Gospels, right? All throughout St. John's Gospel, whenever Jesus does a miracle, he doesn't call it miracle. Whenever Jesus does a miracle in John's Gospel, John calls it a sign and wonder. What do signs do? Signs point to something. What are they pointing to? They're pointing to the fact that Jesus is who he says he is. Look at Mark chapter 2. There's this famous story, we all know it, right? There's this paralyzed man and he's got 4 friends, good friends. And they're trying to bring their friend who's paralyzed to see Jesus, but the house Jesus is in is just packed and he can't get through the door. So these 4 friends are so committed to bringing this guy to Jesus, they go on the roof and they start playing Chip and Joanna. And it's like, go Waco, Texas. It's like, even more. And so they start renovating. It's a fixer-upper. It's a skylight now. And we're lowering the guy down in front of Jesus. You ever imagine who owned that house, the guy? He's like, what? Fine. Anyways, the guy lowers in front of Jesus. Jesus looked at the faith of the friends and he says to the man, your sins are forgiven. Everyone's like, say what? And they ask themselves, who but God can forgive sins? And Jesus is like, aha, aha. Jesus knows what they're thinking and he says, exactly, who but God can forgive sins? Which is easier, to say to the man, your sins are forgiven, or rise, pick up your mat and walk? To prove to you that I am who I say I am. He looks at the man, rise, pick up your mat and walk. And Jesus does this again and again and again. I mean, remember the man who was deaf and he couldn't speak? I mean, even in weird ways, Jesus heals people to prove that he is who he says he is. I always think this story is so funny. Jesus walks up to this man. He can't hear and he can't speak. And so it says in the scripture that Jesus walks up to the man, puts his fingers in his ears, then spitting touches his tongue and says, be opened. Imagine if you were that guy. You don't know what's going on. You can't hear, right? This guy's coming up, hey, come here. No, it's okay. Touches your tongue. What are you doing, Jesus? What's happening right now? And his ears were open and he could speak. I think the bigger miracle is the fact that he could actually speak like words and language. Do you remember that time? Oh my gosh, there was a little 12-year-old girl, and her dad runs to Jesus. My daughter is sick, come to her. By the time they get to her, she's dead. And they say, leave him alone. Jesus says, listen, let me at her. And he takes her by the wrist and he says 2 words. He says, Talitha kumi, which in English means, little girl, arise. And this girl that was dead is now alive. And what's that mean? It means Jesus is who he says he is. One of the biggest ones, the one I love all of them. I love all of them. But in John chapter 11, there's this story in John 11 where Jesus has these 3 friends. They're sisters and a brother, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. Like, you guys Bible scholars? Have you heard this one before? And Mary and Martha say, Jesus, the one you love is ill. Come quickly. And then it bothers me because Jesus takes his time, because he's Jesus. By the time he gets there, Lazarus isn't sick anymore because Lazarus is dead. Never thought of it that way. Well, at least he's not sick. So, and they're all weeping, and Jesus at one point says, take me to where you've laid him. Take me to the tomb. This is really important because they bring him to the tomb, and in John chapter 11, it's the shortest verse in the entire New Testament. It's 2 words. When Jesus got to the tomb of Lazarus, his friend who is dead, it just says, Jesus wept. I want to press pause on that for just a second because I think we need to just reflect. I don't know if you've ever felt like this. If you've ever felt like the stuff that breaks your heart, everyone else thinks is just stupid. Like maybe you fell in love in high school and then the person broke up with you and you're just like so heartbroken and your parents are like, oh gosh, it's just puppy love. You're gonna get over it. Why are you crying? Like, because you're like Bella and you're sitting hunched around and like the camera's going around your head as the months tick by. Like, get over it, Bella. But for you, it was a big deal. Your parents are like, it's no big deal. Sometimes we think that what breaks our heart, God looks at us and says, oh, come on. It's not that big of a deal. You guys, there's heaven. Don't worry about it because listen, everyone dies. Thanks, Jesus. But in this moment, when Jesus sees the tomb of his friend and he sees his friends, sisters, his friends as well, their wound, their grief, their sadness, Jesus weeps. Here's the thing. If you follow Jesus, you follow the God of the broken heart. A God whose heart breaks for what breaks your heart. He knows what he's going to do. He knows that in like 3 minutes, now Lazarus is going to be alive. He doesn't show up to the tomb and like, okay, this is awesome. This is so great. Okay, guys, just wait. Oh my gosh, this is the biggest prank ever. No. He lets it break his heart. If you follow Jesus, you follow the God of the broken heart, a God who loves you and whose heart breaks for what breaks your heart. And then Jesus does this. He says, roll away the stone. And I love this because in the gospel, the sister of Lazarus says, Lord. Now here's the thing for us. When someone gets sick and someone dies, typically we take them to the hospital first, and then after they die, someone else comes and takes their body and takes them away. And then when they're taken away, then someone else prepares their body for burial, and then someone else buries their body. But in this culture, if you had someone in your family, they would die in your home, and you would watch them die and care for them as they died. Then you would care for their body after they died. You would anoint their body after they died. You would lay their dead body in the tomb. So if you lived in this culture, you know what dead looks like. And apparently, if you lived in this culture, you know what dead smells like. Because Martha says,